If you've listened to this show, you know how I feel about this writer, Lee Jenkins. I think he's, there's not great sports writing anymore, just because of the newspaper industry and magazines, but he's one of the great sports writers, and not surprised that he got an exclusive with LeBron James. And I was there at the Sportsman of the Year, and Lee Jenkins did the profile on LeBron James, and I felt like LeBron treated him as if he was part of the family. So when LeBron decided that they were going to do this in a different way to announce he's going back to Cleveland, he went through Lee Jenkins of Sports Illustrated, who joins us now. Lee, is there any coincidence to him doing it in this manner as opposed to what happened the first time around with the decision in Jim Gray and ESPN?
Hey, Dan, first off, just want to thank you for the kind words there. But, and I don't think there is a coincidence. I think they wanted to do something 180 degrees different. And, I think he wanted a chance to kind of look at his words before they were presented and also do it in sort of an easygoing way. I mean, I interviewed him like I always interview him. It was in a hotel. He was very relaxed. It was just totally different kind of atmosphere than that stage. And one thing I've noticed with him is he's, as much time as he's spent in front of cameras through his life, he's kind of a different guy and is very much more at peace when he's away from cameras. So I think in that sense, I'm lucky that I didn't have a camera crew with me.
How tough was it to keep this secret?
It wasn't that long. I mean, we were talking about a little less than 24 hours. So it goes against your instincts as a reporter and how you've come up to know something like this and not be able to share it. But, it was part of a deal that I made. It was part of an embargo that I wasn't going to be able to share it, that it would have to be in this manner. And the reason I was okay with that is I felt like it was a two-pronged story. Everybody wanted to know where he was going, but they also wanted to know the why and the how, especially if it was going to be a move. So what I originally wanted was, in his words, to be able to explain why he was going where he was going. I didn't really expect that we'd necessarily have it first. That was sort of a happy coincidence.
How many people knew LeBron's decision before he made it public?
Well, I'm his inner circle. I told one editor that morning, about an hour and a half beforehand. But it wasn't a lot. I mean, it was a very tight circle, and they wanted to he wanted to release it this way. I think he wanted his voice to go. And one thing I've learned about him is he's a very thoughtful guy. He's a cerebral guy. I think he's underrated as an interview. And when the times I've interviewed him before, the quotes end up being really long because once his voice goes, he's really insightful. And in this case, it was sort of the same deal. It was just like one long quote kind of stitched together rather than a bunch of shorter quotes.
Talking to Lee Jenkins of Sports Illustrated, had the exclusive with LeBron James joining us, Dan Patrick Show. I maintain, if I'm looking at a checklist, and I could be wrong with it, but I think there's so much of this that was PR, business, and then basketball in that order. Mm-hmm. You've been around him. If you were going to look at the order I just placed that in, this decision, how would you
Well, I think emotion has to be on the list, though. I mean, the sentiment for where he's from is real. And I think if you look back at the last 4 years, there are breadcrumbs all over the place that showed that this was what he was going to do. I mean, remember when James Blair ran on the floor? What athlete sits there and, pats the guy on the head, basically? I mean, we're talking about a guy who, after his first championship, kind of mused about what a parade would look like down East 9th Street. I mean, there is no doubt that there was an emotional pull, that he realizes that he has a deep meaning, and he can be a global icon and all that, but he has a deep meaning in Northeast Ohio, and I think that it still bothered him, this notion that he went and cherry-picked championships in Miami and didn't do it where he was from, and I think he wanted to complete that circle. So, while the PR is obviously he understands narrative as much as any athlete, and he knows how this now turns the narrative. But I do think that some of this really is the heart, just because of his connection with that region. Not everybody feels that way about their hometown, but he does.
Was it worth it for him to do 4 years in Miami?
I think there's no doubt. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think he had to. He had to learn how to be a real pro, how to be a champion. And there are elements of the Heat organization that are just they're a step above most of the NBA. I mean, they're one of those really enviable franchises where there's stability, consistency. I think he learned from them. He learned how to be a pro. He became a much more balanced basketball player these last 4 years. And I think in a sense it was, he made the comparison to college. I thought it was pretty appropriate that he sort of learned how to do this, how to be a champion, and now he's going back to where it started to impart some of those lessons and maybe pull through for Cleveland.
Could Miami have done anything different to change this?
They could have won. I mean, I think if they won it all, I can't imagine. And this isn't from him, but I just can't imagine he would have walked away from 3 titles in a row if they'd have won. But you're in a tough spot, when you have a player like Dwayne Wade who has some knee issues he has. And again, this isn't from him, but there's just not a lot of flexibility there as far as the salary cap and the structure of the CBA to get younger. And again, I do think that more of this had to do with emotion, because when you look at this pragmatically, he still would be better off in Miami. I mean, as far as just a chance to win a championship next year. Now, maybe going forward, you could make an argument for Cleveland, but Chris Bosh is only 30. Wade is 32. His odds would have been better with Eric Spoelstra in Miami than signing up with something he has no idea about in Cleveland.
Was there any chance he was going to partner with Carmelo Anthony?
I don't think he was. There was no chance that he was going to go anywhere but Miami or Cleveland. I mean, I know there were meetings, but I just think we go back to this understanding of narrative. I think he knows the way that would have looked. And I also think he has very little interest in this idea now of it has to be 5 or 6 or 7. You have to win a championship every year. I mean, that's one, I think, underrated part of this is he's changing the arithmetic a bit. It's no longer now about LeBron James has to win a championship every year. It's now more about, can he get one? Can he get one in Cleveland? Because one in Cleveland would mean so many more than anywhere else.
I agree. I thought if he won the championship, he would leave. You didn't think he would. I thought it allowed him to say, mission accomplished. I've given you. Now it's time for me to go back. Because Cleveland was the only place that he could go without being vilified. And I think he's a sensitive guy. Social media, he reads it, he hears it, and I do think it affects him. And I think that if he was going to leave, Cleveland was the only place that he could go to.
No, I think you're right. And there's no doubt that he is not insulated in that way. I mean, he is very much a modern athlete. It's like the TV, Twitter, it is all very much a part of his life. He hears everything. And, you hear him say, I don't want to please people. I don't care what people think of me. Dwight Howard says that too. I don't totally buy that. I mean, I definitely think that, part of this, I think he's embracing the feel-good nature of what he's done.
Have you heard from him since all of this transpired?
No, I mean, I don't have that. I don't have that kind of relationship with him. It's very much of a, you have a certain amount of time to interview him. You go and you do it, and you write the story and move on. But I've been fortunate enough to have several of those sit-down interviews with him. And really, what was interesting about this is it was no different. I mean, it felt exactly the same. The structure was just a little different.
There a question you did not get answered?
No, there wasn't. Now, looking back, I should have asked about the contract because, I found that interesting that it was only for the 2 years. And I know that there's going to be, that the max salaries will probably rise.
Could he leave again, Lee?
I can't imagine. Can you, Dan? I mean, it would have to completely implode. I mean, I guess Andrew Wiggins would have to be.
We couldn't imagine him going back. Now
I know. I mean, and that's the thing. You never say never, but there's the thing is that it doesn't make sense because this is a long play. I mean, I don't know that the next 2 years are going to even determine whether this was a good move or not. I mean, it could be year 3 before he bears the fruit of this when Kyrie Irving is 25, 26, and these guys have a chance to grow up because there's going to be huge growing pains here with this team unless they make a move.
Well done, Lee. Always good to talk to you. Congratulations.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words.
All right. That's Lee Jenkins, Sports Illustrated.